together. I was the chairperson, but I could not have done this without super important people. Dave Sackett couldn't be here. He's busy building a tunnel in faraway places. And so we're sad not to have him today. But Peggy Farrell, Louise Slate, Anat Moore, Amelia DeCruz, Jessica Maslin, Summer Gladden, all helped to make this happen. We have important moderators, Nancy Gruden and Rima McManus, who will be moderating some of our sessions. And last but not least, Paul Olson. So Paul helped us bring in some great speakers today. He seems to know everyone, and we really appreciate his support. And with that, I will turn this over to Paul for his special presentation.
Thank you, Leanne. Are you driving the slides?
I will. I'm going to pull that up right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, while Leanne pulls this up, I don't want to bring the tone of the excitement of the conference down, but the society lost a dear friend and a dear leader last month, very close to most of us. And at our committee meeting, as a friend, I requested permission to do a tribute to probably one of the most finest engineers that served in the Corps of Engineers. It's General Bo Temple, and many of you know him as a former Chief of Engineers and a Deputy Chief of Engineers, but most of us here know him as a Virginia engineer who was enormously active in both SAME and ASCE chapters. Next slide. So a couple pictures to pay tribute to this great engineer, great leader. Words from our new Chief of Engineers, my friend, Lieutenant General Scott Spellman. He truly is a legacy, a true giant. As I said before, many of us will remember this side of Bo Temple standing outside of Fort Monroe. He was a true Virginia engineer, a true leader, always at our functions, whether it was a small chapter meeting or this meeting last year, a great speaker, a great leader, and a true Virginia engineer. Next slide. If you knew Bo, he wasn't very tall. In fact, we had a change of command ceremony and he had his 5'4" next to my 6'3", and it was one of the few times I think the unit colors had to be handed upwards. But he did not let that 5'4" slow him down. This is a picture of him in Iraq with one of his most famous quotes that always made me smile, that he never let his stature slow him down. And if those of you had served with him in combat, his nickname was Bone Crusher. Next slide. This is often the side of General Temple you would see. He was a comic, he was a humor, he was always smiling. His motivation was infectious, whether it's deployed in Iraq, Afghanistan, or in an airborne battalion. Bo always had a way to connect with soldiers and make them feel like Supermen. Next slide. After retirement, Bo settled into the Virginia community around Richmond and became a premier engineer in both ASCE, that helped me lead the sea level rise effort at ODU a couple years ago, advised me on offshore wind, and ensured that Virginia would continually produce great engineers by working closely with Virginia Commonwealth University, Virginia Tech, UVA, and of course, Old Dominion University. Before you switch, I'd like to read a quote, one of my favorite quotes from Thucydides. "The whole earth is the tomb of heroic men and their story is not only on stone over their clay, but abides everywhere without visible symbol, woven into the stuff of other men's lives. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who know Bo, he has woven himself into our lives and made sure that we continue the legacy of fine engineering. That's a quote from Thucydides. Here are my thoughts. In peacetime, one follows leaders because of the rank they wear on their shoulder. In wartime, one follows leaders because of what they hold in their hearts. I've had the opportunity to serve both as a subordinate officer under General Temple, as well as a close friend. And he will mentor me, his spirit will mentor me for years to come. Next slide. I'll leave you with this thought. And I think I'd like to take a few moments of silence, have us all take a few moments of silence while we reflect on this great leader. Okay, Leanne, let's close the show. Well, she's teeing up the next presentation. It's my absolute honor to introduce our post commander, Captain Jeff Lenke. He's currently the commander of Amphibious Construction Battalion 2, who in shorts does all engineering operations across the full spectrum of engineering to make sure the Navy can get from sea to shore. That's a heavy lift. Prior than that, we all will be happy to know that he's got a wealth of experience in the military construction arena, prior being the vice commander of the NAVFAC Atlantic, XO of NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic. And if that's not the right stuff, he was also a CB commander, where I will fully confess the CBs make the best military engineers in our armed forces. And if that's not enough, he served as a congressional legislative liaison in his past. So, Jeff, we're expecting you to get a lot of Milcom money over to Hampton Roads. I've never met you, Jeff, but I got all this from LinkedIn. So good job on your profile. I see you have 26 mutual friends, and clearly they all warned you not to accept my LinkedIn request. But I would say, because I gave you such a great introduction, that you consider clicking and accepting my request. With that little bit of humor, I'll turn it over to our post president, Captain Jeff Lenke.
Hey, well, thanks, Paul, so much for the kind words there, and yes, I will certainly glad to accept your LinkedIn request, and then as you can see from our 26 mutual connections already, the network of engineers here in the Hampton Roads runs far and wide, and we're probably more connected than we think, and thanks again for the tribute there to General Temple. I had the pleasure of meeting him once, just briefly in passing, and certainly a gentleman and a leader, and he will be missed. Hey, I appreciate the handoff today. As Paul mentioned, I'm the president of the Hampton Roads Post, together with the Virginia Peninsula Post and the Central Virginia Post. We're bringing you this exciting and relevant program today. Lots of great topics and great speakers. It is my distinct honor this morning to introduce our keynote speaker to kick us off. He is a graduate of Villanova University and also of Stanford University. He served 32 years in the Navy and as part of the Navy's Civil Engineer Corps as well, in leadership positions across the spectrum of facility management and engineering, contingency and wartime construction, at our Navy Installations Command in Washington, D.C., in the Pentagon, doing the real fight there for Milcon dollars. He retired as a Rear Admiral. He currently works with AECOM as the Senior Vice President and National Accounts Leader. He is an SAME Fellow, and he is also our SME National President-elect for next year. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce our speaker, Admiral Mark Handley. Sir, over to you.
Jeff, hey, thanks very much. I appreciate it, and it's great to be with you here today. I'm I'm joining you from the deck of the USS Stennis,
Yes.
as you can kind of see my new background for today, since it's all about maritime security and maritime presence. But first of all, to Paul, an absolute wonderful tribute to a leader, to a hero, to a gentleman, Bo Temple. I did have the distinct pleasure of an honor to serve with him in combat, and Bone Crusher. I did not know at the time, but now I know why I got that nickname. He was again, had a lot of energy and was just a great leader and a great friend. I've connected with him many times after coming out of Iraq, so it was great to do that one. I was going to, Paul, I was going to just kind of, comment about the Army Navy, but there's already a piece in the chat, but you made up with it with the tribute to the United States Navy Seabees. And I'm sure Jeff Linke appreciates that, having served both as a battalion commander of a mobile battalion and now an amphibious battalion covering the full spectrum. So thanks. But let me just offer my welcome to everybody and thanks for joining in today. It's really an honor to be here with you. For SAME, it's our centennial. It's and again, kind of fitting 100 years ago when SAME was founded. In the midst of the Spanish flu, which was far more severe than what we're going through now. But I do hope that everyone will stay safe. And now more than ever, our diligence will save lives. And I hope you all stay healthy and have a great holiday season as you go through this. I think we all know we're going to make it through this. We're starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine starting. But again, that's kind of how SAME started 100 years ago, and we have a great legacy. I think one of our SAME presidents early on was Charles Dow, who was Vice President of the United States. And one of our greatest, proudest members of SAME was Douglas MacArthur. So very strong connections to the military. But now we're about 28,000 strong across the world. And we're really committed to supporting national security through the built environment. And we're going to talk about that with relation to maritime security today. So, and SAME really sees itself, the best way we can do this is serve our nation as the foremost integrator for leadership development and technical collaborations within our architect, engineer, and construction community. But again, this is a great event. I will talk a little bit about what's coming up, but again, this event alone supports many of the 5 SAME goals for the 2025 strategic plan. First and foremost is that strengthening our industry government engagement. You've got some powerhouse speakers coming up from the government, and obviously a lot of industry partners bringing innovation, which you'll also see highlighted today. And it is about building and sustaining resilient communities. I often think of, we just celebrated the 7th of December in Pearl Harbor. And if you think about how many ships were damaged there, and the 2 mistakes that the Japanese made that day, one was to not attack the fuel depot at Red Hill in Hawaii, which carried most of the fuel stores for the Pacific. But the second one was to leave the shipyards really untouched. And that enabled the Navy to be resilient and get most of those ships back into the fight, and even a carrier back into the fight for the Battle of Midway, which turned the tide. And again, I'd also offer for all the folks that are joining us, part of this is developing leaders for the profession. And this is a way you do it, is through events like this, is technical and current sharing of information as we do that. And then finally, I just jump to this one helps folks like, Jeff Linke, you saw in uniform, commanding officer today. But at some point, he's going to transition like I did a few years ago to the AEC industry. And these types of events all help because it does prepare you for what industry does in support of our national security as we go forward. So again, I am very impressed with what you've put on today. A powerhouse agenda, shipyards to bridges and tunnels, offshore wind, a major topic for this region and our nation. I had a discussion on offshore wind. I had a discussion yesterday with Admiral Bob Marley, retired Admiral Bob Marley, who's actually up at DOE heading this up, and that's a major initiative for the new administration. So, to my hats off for that. And again, we're going to see some great ones on with Captain Bill Butler on the SIOP program. I'll talk a little bit about that. as we go forward as well, because I think it's very relevant today, especially about the maritime importance and the support that it gets from the built environment. But the foundation of it, if you think about it, is really about sea power. As a junior officer, I had an opportunity to be the facilities officer at the Naval War College, and all of the buildings have historic names. One of them's Mahan Hall, right? And at the time, I had no idea who he was, but he was a naval officer in the U.S. Navy and a historian. And he was probably one of the most important American strategists of the 19th century. But he very often argued that the British control of the seas paved the way for Great Britain's emergence as a world dominant military, political, and economic power, because it is one of those founding elements that you need to be a global power. But if you think about it, we know 90% of the world's commerce travels by sea. The vast majority of our population lives within a few hundred miles of our oceans. And again, 3/4 of the planet is covered by water. So, the security, prosperity, vital interests of the United States are really coupled to other nations now more than ever before. And our nation is best served by fostering a peaceful global system that's comprised of interdependent networks of trade, finance, information flow, governance. But we prosper because this system of exchange among nations, although it is vulnerable to a range of disruptions that can produce harmful effects, we have a very strong and capable Navy in order to secure that. And so, if you look at it fundamentally, there's, 6 core capabilities for maritime power. That one is, forward presence, and our Navy is deployed. It is deterrence, about, deterrence through strength. And then the other one is sea control, and that's to maintain access for goods and for products to flow freely for free trade, but to maintain control of the sea. And another element is power projection. And again, part of that is coupled with deterrence, gives the strength to maintain that sea control. But again, it's also really about maritime security. And that's really securing the freedom of navigation for the benefit of all nations as we go forward. And then the last element of that is humanitarian assistance and disaster response. And you see that whenever there's a hurricane or an earthquake somewhere. We have the USS Comfort off the coast. We have Marines and sailors providing disaster response and humanitarian assistance whenever and wherever needed as we do that. But part of that is, and again, those are all great capabilities, but the challenge is maintaining that capability in a high state of readiness. So one of those key elements in maintaining that is the physical infrastructure, what supports that. The Navy has lots of infrastructure, lots of bases, but I've always said, and I had this when I was in the Pentagon, my boss at the time, Admiral Lou Smith, who ended up being a chief of civil engineers, always focused on what he called piers and runways. And what it really was were the mission facilities that make the most difference to those to the Navy. Those are the ones that are supporting the aircraft and the ships before they deploy, get them ready to deploy. It was interesting. I think I was in one of those Pentagon briefs that you can't replicate anywhere else, but we were arguing for more money for the shore infrastructure. And I think the quote from a 3-star admiral was, I don't care about that much about the shore infrastructure, but I do want that pier to last until my last ship leaves that port. After that, it can fall into the water for all I care. And it really just kind of put in perspective the operational forces that put that priority on those operational platforms, and where it matters most to them is where that connects back to that platform. All the infrastructure is part of the fabric of the Navy that maintains the everything from family housing to childcare centers to training facilities and everything else. But it is those piers, those runways, those operational facilities that matter the most. And now we look at kind of the Navy of the future. One of the things we look at is, one of the things we always look at is the capacity. What's the size of our Navy fleet? Right now we have about 296 active ships. I remember when I was a junior officer in the 1980s, Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman at the time, had a vision of a 600 ship Navy. We actually built out facilities and new bases in order to support that. Most of those new bases have been closed through BRAC and other actions as we've kind of downsized from that. That was the peak of the Cold War when we had a Navy of that size. But again, today we got about 296, and the Navy needs. We've heard it before. Navy 355 ships is what they're looking for. The new shipbuilding plan that just got released earlier last week calls for about 355 ships by about 2030, 2031. Give you a sense of the magnitude of what that takes. The 30-year shipbuilding plan that they've just released by FY 2025 would spend about $34 billion a year on shipbuilding. So that's about 82 ships between now and 2026 at a cost of about 147 billion total. So that's a massive increase compared to what we've had in previous plans. But again, that's kind of tells you, kind of what that requirement is. But to grow a Navy of that size, first of all, you have to maintain the Navy that you have today, or you'll just be treading water. If we don't maintain the ships today, by the time we build a new ship, we'll decommission a ship. And so, the new ship build, we build a ship, we decommission a ship. So, maintaining the ships that we have is critically important. And I've always looked at, fleet maintenance is really no easy task. So for us in the engineering and construction community, think of your largest and most complex renovation and modernization design and construction project that you could imagine, right? And then make that facility watertight, make it survivable so it could last an attack, put multiple weapons systems on it, and they're not simple weapon systems, they're complex weapon systems, and then add a propulsion plant and a full suite of communications gear. And now you want to maintain that facility. So in order to maintain that facility, place that building that we just, I just kind of envisioned, put it in a dry dock or an industrial complex, and have not only one ship getting repaired, but having multiple ships getting repaired simultaneously. And then on top of that, you can throw a nuclear power plant in there that requires special tooling, requires precise quality control, and absolutely no margin for error. So you can kind of see how large and complex that task is. And then try and do that in a 100-year-old shipyard, right? As we kind of do that. So obviously, to maintain these complex platforms that we have today, 300 or more of these, the Navy's got to have some modern and effective and efficient shipyards. And I don't want to take Bill Butler's thunder and the SIOP team that's going to be presenting later, because they've got a great presentation about how they've done, some modeling and simulation in order to optimize shipyard layout and design. But I will tell you, I had a great discussion with Vice Admiral Moore, who was just recently NAVSEA, just retired. He and I were both 1-stars in the Pentagon together. I was doing the shore side, fighting for shore money. He was fighting for ship maintenance money. And the topic of shipyards always came up because we always underinvested in shipyards. So I think as he looked at the CNO, looked for that 355 ship Navy, he really looked at that as an opportunity to highlight the built environment and the necessary investments we need to make. And that was really the birth of the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program, or SIOP. So these shipyards we know are 100 years old. And I will say that this is a once in a career opportunity for the people that are working on that. And so, I envy guys like Bill Butler and the folks at NAVFAC and NAVSEA that are working on that, because it really is an opportunity to really create an infrastructure that's going to last for another 100 years. And then they'll be having the same conversation as they kind of go forward. So one of the things, this kind of illustrates the Navy's need to have shore infrastructure that keeps pace with modern ships, the ones that we have today. but also the more modern ones that are going to come in our future, the unmanned vessels and other things that are going to be in our future. And so that kind of also tells us that we have a need for innovation. We have to be, not only efficient, but we also have to be effective. And we know the 100-year-old design won't cut it. So we've got to look at new ways in order to lay out that infrastructure and how to maintain those fleets. So we really need that infrastructure to maintain a modern Navy. So what does that innovation look like? So for me, that innovation looks like what you're going to hear about in the digital twin, the modeling of our shipyards, modeling not only the shipyard, but the maintenance, the industrial facilities that support it. I think it'll be shipyards today. In the future, I think the next step for the Navy will be fleet readiness centers that are essentially the aircraft equivalent of shipyards, right? That's where they do the depot maintenance for their aircraft. The other innovations that it looks like it's high performance buildings. The buildings today become, the Internet of Things ready and a cyber secure facility, really to optimize the building performance so that you get the maximum out of the new facilities that you are building. And so I think that's another area of innovation that we look at in, particularly in our maintenance facilities that we're going to be in those shipyards, but also on the waterfront, supporting fleet maintenance. We've gone through an evolution with energy savings performance contracts, and they have to do more than just install LED lights and upgrade HVAC systems. And, those are the low-hanging fruit projects that we do that have been done in the past for the Navy and all the services. But it's more things like, battery energy storage systems with a microgrid to optimize renewable energy and really improve energy security. If you think about a power plant on a shipyard or on the waterfront, so that if there is an outage, they have that emergency battery backup and a microgrid and a generation in order to maintain operations and continue to provide, either it's training shoreside or it's ongoing maintenance that they've got. I think those ESPCs also will evolve to look at building envelopes to address some of, not only make them more energy efficient, but also address some of the latent problems that some of those historic facilities have had in the past. And then the other one is, I think we're from the innovation side, we're also going to have to look at innovation in construction, early contractor involvement. I think a good example is the Maritime Security Training Facility here in Norfolk that NAVFAC Mid-Atlantic has contracted for. And we've got industry partners, I think it's Jacobs and RQ that are RQ Construction that are working on that project. That's one that we really want to succeed so that we can make that a model for, how we do business in the future. Get the input from the contractor in the design process so that we really get the most efficient and effective building going forward. And then the other one is advanced work packaging, an approach that the Construction Industry Institute is pushing forward, which really looks at how do you, instead of going out with traditional plans and specs, which are really good for designers and allow you to see what a building is going to look like, package that work the way that it's actually constructed and do it in a way that optimizes the construction of it so that an individual that's doing a portion of the work has all the resources, all the information, all the tools necessary in order to complete that task. And that is found to eliminate a great deal of waste. It's part of lean construction. And again, that's part of that innovation in construction that we've got to look at going forward. And then really kind of the last piece I'll kind of touch on is, when you implement innovation, you also have to look at your risk models. And I believe that shared risk is key to success. And I know from, my experience with NAVFAC and others, and I think most of you can be here, the Navy and the federal government often tries to engineer out risk. And I don't believe you can engineer out risk and achieve goals of implementing innovation at a reasonable cost. But I do believe that you have to manage that risk. One of the ways that you manage that risk, I think, is through partnering. I think partnering is absolutely essential as you manage risk. And managing risk requires more communication, and partnering enables that communication at every level, not just at the at the working level, but also provides some tools to help you improve communication at other levels as well. It usually involves a risk register, and that has a piece which clearly defines who owns which portions of the risk and how issues are to be resolved. And then it also talks about issue resolution and when and where leadership needs to get engaged. And so an escalation matrix and a partnering agreement ensures that issues are resolved at the appropriate levels, but it really prevents issues from lingering or causing more challenges. Too often we've seen issues get lingered at one level, and it may get confrontational, but once it rises up to another level within the organization, both organizations, both in the contractor and on the government side, usually they're able to find a middle ground and find a solution that may not have been available to the people that are working the issue at that level. So again, all good things to help you manage risk, and that's an enabler for innovation as well as you kind of go through that. So Jeff, I know we want to make this interactive. We'll go to questions here in a minute, but I kind of go through this, and I also think about this as our last discussion we had was about winning in the turns and leadership in crisis. And I think we're coming into a period within our nation, and also as we kind of have a turnover administrations, that we're in a turn. And so there is opportunity in those turns. And, we talked that day about, everyone kind of remain calm and composed. Teams are going to follow your lead. You can give them a sense of urgency to motivate them, organize them, and move them in the right direction. Communication is key. And timely decision making as things evolve, and building a really strong team. But as we kind of go forward, I think this new administration is going to provide new opportunities for our industry and for the engineers, the military engineers that are managing our shore infrastructure. I think they're going to be laser focused on restarting first they'll be laser focused on COVID, and I think we saw the first vaccine, I think, happened yesterday. It was a nurse in an ICU that got the very first vaccination for COVID in the United States. And again, I think that's going to be a press. But as we come out of that, they're going to be a laser focus on restarting the economy. There will be some COVID relief for small companies and others, and for individuals perhaps. But I think they're also going to come out of this with a focus on infrastructure and recapitalization of our infrastructure. If you listen to the discussions in Washington, it's either a really big number with a B behind it, or it's a small number with a T behind it. So it's either going to be hundreds of billions of dollars or $1 trillion. And that'll be somewhat political, but it's going to be a big number. In the Pentagon, we used to say, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you start talking about real money. This one is real money. This is going to be large. I also think there's an opportunity that, public-private ventures, P3 funding, could be resurrected. Energy has a really good one, a really good model that can be followed. But again, I think they're going to look at all sorts of infrastructure that could go through that P3 path as well. So that, we're not out of the woods, but I do think the future is extremely bright. Again, vaccination started yesterday. We'll have a new administration in January. Hopefully some of the churn will die down, regardless of your political affiliation. What we want to do is focus on what's best for the country, what's best for our nation. And I think we're going to see some form of infrastructure stimulus. We're going to get I have a sense that the nation is really ready to get back to work. And I would say back to normal. It'll be a new normal. We're going to probably do conferences a little bit different than we have in the past, with some mix of personal and in-person and virtual. I think work location is going to matter much less going forward. I can already see it within my firm. There's a discussion of who actually has to come back in the office and who doesn't. And that'll change the dynamic a little bit. But either way, in that new normal, I think engagement is going to matter more than it ever has in the past. And that's why I think forums like this are important, helps you stay connected, stay current. And so, Jeff, my hat's off to you and the other posts that come together to put this program together today. I think it's a great forum. I'm looking forward to tuning into some of your speakers as we kind of go forward. But with that, let me turn it back over to you and open it up for any questions that you might have.
So I can take the questions for you. I have one question. Do you think that the infrastructure investment in the next Congress will be tied to the COVID-19 recovery, or do you think that will be separated and separately authorized?
Yeah, that one's a tough one to kind of predict what Congress is going to do. We're kind of in that between administrations right now. They're going to try and push. I believe they'll push COVID relief first, and they'll follow that with infrastructure investment to restart the economy. I think we'll focus first on relief, and then. But honestly, I think Paul joked about Jeff being a former congressional liaison, and did that job. And I had plenty of times where I went on the Hill. I don't do that anymore. But again, just seeing the pattern of what I've been seeing, I suspect it'll be sequential, and it'll again depend on how fast and how quick the economy recovers.
As a follow-up to the smart grid success, will NAVFAC be developing plans to implement smart base/campus?
Yeah, so first of all, I hope that NAVFAC does, and I think there are elements of, the smart base that, maybe about 5-10 years ago, they really were focused on. I think it's kind of lost a little bit of that momentum. I think smart base is harder than we initially planned. I think, I walked through a couple of the op centers, the one up in DC with NAVFAC Washington. They did some tremendous things, but they showed potential. And I suspect they're still doing very well, but it hasn't seen that go widespread yet. But again, I think that, the energy security part of the, smart grid and that smart base could be a driver that is going to get NAVFAC and the Navy to, put some weight behind that as they go forward. But again, I think they're still in that nascent stage where they're looking for great examples of where it works. I'm really excited to watch how the Miramar microgrid is successful now that it's built. And I know we've had some of those presentations at some of the SAME, JETSI, and other events. But that's, I want to see how it does 2 or 3 years from now, and how the maintenance, and if it's able to continue and provide real value and real energy security going forward.
How do you choose which projects get selected for ECI?
So this is, my opinion is that, you want to have projects that have, that are, large and complex, but maybe not your most complex ones, because ECI is challenging as you do it. But it generally, I think, has better value for you when you have, if you're going to do a straightforward barracks, it's probably going to have some minor value for it. But the maritime training facility was new. It's important. They wanted to get it right. I think there's a lot of skin in the game. I think they picked great partners, great industry partners to do that with. And I think that as you do the ECI, establishing, we talked about partnering earlier, but I think that partnering is probably more important in a early contractor involvement than on any other contract that NAVFAC will do. Mostly because it's really about facilitating the team and working them together in order to get to a desired outcome. And it really takes teamwork. And it really is a different model than, our traditional design, bid, build, where, you end up in a, people that are pointing to a degree of, different, it's shared responsibility when it's ECI, because everybody has skin in the game. And it's a little bit different when a design, bid, build, where people are kind of segment their responsibilities, and you have handoffs. Whenever you have handoffs, you have chances for, delays, for quality problems, for schedule problems. When you have more integration of it, then I think you have more ownership in those handoffs. So I think those are probably the key ones.
So along with that, is there a list of potential future ECI projects? And will that be shared with industry, or is that something that's kept under wraps?
I certainly hope so. I know NAVFAC on the first one, they're in a pilot for this, but I would say that that is probably a topic that we ought to keep talking about as we go forward, because NAVFAC hasn't necessarily. I'm not sure. And Jeff, I know it's your old command when you're back at NAVFAC Land, but I don't believe the Maritime Skills Facility, Maritime Training Facility is finished yet. So I don't know if you have any feedback on how well it's done, and I'm not sure if you got Trace Meeks on or not, or you want to throw that to someone else.
Well, so yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if Trace Meek or anyone from NAVFAC proper is on, certainly they can chime in. As you mentioned, I was there about a year or so ago as that ECI project was selected, and it was really, as you mentioned, a pilot. So I think it's everything I've heard has been tremendously positive. I think there's an expectation of doing many more to come. There was tremendous interest from leadership after seeing how well that one started off and how quickly it got going. So I think there will be more to come. I don't know if they've selected those yet. I don't think that will be kept a secret. I think as soon as the Navy decides to use that methodology, they will clearly communicate that, because obviously a big part of it is having is the partnership from the designers and the construction partners as well. So there's a couple other forums where NAVFAC leadership comes out and talks about projects in the year ahead. We had Captain Meek on a month or so ago talking about their list of projects for the next year. And so I would say continue to engage in those forums and ask those questions. But I think in this case is one of those. NAVFAC is running to try and catch up with how the private sector does some of this, and seeing the value and building it a bit as we fly. So the question about does NAVFAC know which ones they're doing? They probably are starting to identify those as we head into next year. The part of the question about will they tell industry? I think absolutely they will, and please continue that dialogue and that engagement. Over.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think I'm confident in NAVFAC as soon as they kind of get yes, this has worked, let's go to the next. And what I normally see in the pattern in NAVFAC is they'll do one pilot, then they'll come up with the next few to kind of, again, really cut their teeth. The challenge always has been mainstreaming things. And I don't think ACI will be mainstream. I think NAVFAC will stay selective in ECI and do it where it matters most, because it is a bigger investment in with your project team. They've got to be more engaged and more involved, and it's different. And so it takes a little bit more to get a new program off the ground. I did talk with Admiral Adamance out in the Pacific. And one of the things he's championing and exploring advanced work packaging, which has an ECI component to it. Does the designer of record prepare those packages with that idea in mind? And so I think he's going to look at finding a pilot to do advanced work packaging. I think that'll have an ECI component as well.
All right, last question before we take a break. As a lead into the SIOP discussion, the fiscal year 2022 fiscal planning framework to accompany the 30-year shipbuilding plan calls for $4.3 billion for SIOP over 5 years. This is far less than the GAO estimate of 20 to 30 billion. Can you comment?
Yeah, very, very, very simply. First, the estimate from GAO is, I think it was 20 billion over 20 years. And so this is obviously the first 5 years. My hat's off to the Navy for programming 4.3 billion in the first 5 years. And I'll give you a non-Navy official answer for a moment. What I've seen in these programs before, they'll start out with a $20 billion program for 20 years. They'll get the mainstay through it. They'll get they'll probably get the new dry docks that they need. They'll get the maintenance facilities, the multi-purpose maintenance facilities that they want in there. They'll get some other infrastructure improvements, and they may not get to the very end and the last few. The last few priority ones, I think, will be challenging. And what typically happens in a program of this size and this magnitude is they get the most critical ones that are going to be required. They have to have the new dry docks for the new Columbia-class sub. And that Columbia-class sub has a delivery date. And that delivery date is it's going to have a retrofit after that delivery date. And so it's going to need a dry dock to go into. So it's going to be a driver. So that is going to get funded, and that's going to get built. And same with some of those high return maintenance facilities that are going to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of those shipyards. But as they get later in the program, some of those lower priority projects might get pushed out into the what we call the out years or unfunded, and it'll compete against the next ship. It's going to compete against the aircraft, and it's also going to compete against the requirement to upgrade the fleet readiness centers, which are where the aviation assets are maintained. And so there'll be lots of competition for those maintenance dollars as we kind of go forward. But again, my hat's off to the Navy for putting $4.3 billion into SIOP over the next 5 years. I think that's going to show some immediate improvement, and looking forward to some of those facilities getting built.
Well, thank you so much for participating today and sharing your insight with us, and of course for all of the hard effort and incredible leadership you show with SAME as a whole. And we're looking forward to having you as our president coming up. So with that, we are going to say goodbye to our first panel, and hope you'll stay around for the rest of the program. And we're going to go into a 15-minute break. Well, 10-minute break. We went a little over, but please meet back at 11 o'clock, and we will start up our next program. It's going to be a great one with MIBE, the Maritime Industrial Base Ecosystem. So we will see you guys at 11 o'clock. And thank you again, Admiral Handley.
Thanks very much, Leanne, and thanks for putting all this together. This is a great seminar, great format you got.